loves! So welcome back for the final case for this week of Favorite Friday. In this case, we're going back to Illinois. Not Chicago, but Illinois. This case I actually probably had never even heard of. It had been for a YouTube recommendation by the lovely channel Faces of the Forgotten, which hence, I guess it's called, why it's called The Forgotten, because I wouldn't have known about it if it hadn't been for him. So, shout out to that channel, of course. Definitely recommend watching them. There's like at least 2 cases that he's covered that I plan on covering myself sometime in the future. I don't know exactly when, but if you want my version on it, you'll get it. You'll get like at least 2 other videos I can think of. And so yeah, with that being said, let me quit my rambling and let's go get started.
But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, maybe you'll get sick of being the monster out of my head, under my bed. Think you're something out of my nightmares, standing right there. But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, then will you get bored of killing?
So of course we're actually going to start off with our victim because there's no date of birth information about our killer. All we know is her name's like Mary and she came from Scotland. So our victim's name is Michelle Leanne Morgan and she was born on July 20th, 1957. Now, father's name is Bill. He's in the army, so also, they live on a base. She's a military kid. What happened to their biological mom, it doesn't say, but we assume they split at one point. She has a brother named George, who's a very key part of the story, so remember George. So on October 17, 1960, Michelle went to the hospital for a laceration on her scalp. On November 28th, she went again for an abrasion on her forehead. And in December 1960, she apparently had burns on her scalp, back, and right side. And these records were not made in December because these burns apparently weren't even discovered until like January 8th of the following year, so 1961. The only reason she actually came in on January 8th is because she had a fracture of her left humerus on her left elbow. So, of course, when claiming, like, how that happened, they would say that I guess Mary, because Bill obviously is, like, off, because, again, he's in the army. Mary's saying that she fell down stairs. She fell down 4 stairs specifically the day before. And there was another visit she had where she was there over a month. So, of course, other sources are saying that, like, she fell off her tricycle sometime mid-December. Other sources are saying that Mary claimed that she fell off the tricycle on January 5th. And another unrelated visit, she visits the hospital again and she's there for like a month. Now, what exactly happened for her to be there a month, it didn't say. So, on the fateful day of August 9th, 1961, Mary apparently was insulting Michelle on the impression that she had lied. What she lied about specifically, don't even know that either. And so, she apparently grabs Michelle's hand and her brother George is witnessing all this. Keep in mind, he's older than Michelle, because apparently he's like 8 when this happens, like 8 and a half. Again, sources differ because it happened back in the 60s. So, he's seeing all this. She is taking Michelle apparently to like this tub of water, puts Michelle's head under said tub of water, and is only bringing her up because she's like begging for her to stop, and she's crying because obviously I think Michelle was like 4 when she died. Mary did take Michelle to the kitchen, and where she continued to beat her. She then made Michelle lie on her back and said that I will stomp on you if you keep lying, which we don't even know if Michelle was actually lying about what she allegedly was getting punished for. So, of course, apparently, Mary did proceed to stomp on her several times. And so, of course, at dinner that night, because, Mary was just over here acting like you didn't just stomp on this child, Michelle over here throws up on her dinner with blood clots, which, you imagine how bad, like, you were beaten to be throwing up blood clots. And so, of course, the father, Billy, he's over asking, what's going on? Like, why is she throwing up blood clots? And she's like, oh, don't worry about it. And apparently, she takes him out of the room. And while she's taking him out of the room, she basically mouths to Michelle that you better eat that damn food. And so she looks at George, her big brother. She's like, I don't want to eat this food. So, of course, the next day, Michelle was asleep and felt dizzy. She was rushed to a hospital on an Air Force base because they are still on this Air Force base. But she sadly died there. And George, sadly, he did not tell anyone what happened. Like, Mary was over here beating the shit out of my sister because he was a kid. Remember, I said he was like 8 and a half, and he was scared nobody was going to believe him. So, fast forward to 1995. It's about like 3.5 decades over, pretty much. And George is in jail because he's serving 45 years for raping his stepdaughter. So apparently sometime during that period, he got married. The girl he got married to had a daughter, and he took advantage of her. Hence why he's in jail for 45 years. So while he's in jail, he decides, you know what? I am going to go look at my family history like people do. So he requests his sister's birth certificate. And so despite her dying in August 1961, like I told you, the funeral home apparently had her listed for dying on July 29th, 1976, and her cause of death being pneumonia, even though clearly this man remembers that his sister was brutally murdered by his stepmom. So he calls the funeral home, like one does, and lets them know, hey, you got this date wrong because I was there, I was around the day of the murder, and I remember what happened. So, of course, the funeral home, they get the police involved because, like, what is this? So on January 31st, 1996, George would be questioned by detectives. So, of course, now there's, like, interest, like, why are you now telling us this 3.5 decades later? And, of course, he tells his version of the story. They're like, why are you just now opening it up? What happened to your sister? And, like, what do you want in exchange for this? Like, you want a short sentence? Do you want to get out early? Like, what? Like, you want immunity? Like, what you want? And he's like, I just want justice for my sister. Now, apparently this is the point where they start believing him, because usually when prisoners are given this much information, especially the death of somebody, they want either immunity or they want a short sentence, they want a name change, some sort of shit. But they're like, look, you just want justice for your sister? Fair enough. So, of course, remember I said she died on a military base, meaning that military hospitals apparently aren't allowed to destroy records, which, you know, thank God. So, with that being said, they look at her records, even though it's like 3 decades ago, they still have the records, because again, they can't destroy the shit. And they see hemorrhaging, torn ligaments, and multiple bruises on her body, which obviously that's not pneumonia, was any sort of pneumonia I've ever seen before. And so her actual cause of death was intra-abdominal bleeding from massive bleeding from the chest. They find the doctor who did that autopsy, and they call him. How they get his number, I don't know. I guess there was like a name, and they like went to the phone book, because again, this is the 90s. So you got phone books and shit. So they call him up, and apparently he said he'd been waiting over 30 years for this call. Why you could just come out and say, hey, this child was murdered? This man said he waited for that phone call. So, of course, the local prosecutor declined to pursue the case because Michelle was a civilian. So even though she was a daughter of a military vet, because she's not a veteran herself, I'm not going to do this case, pretty much. So then in 1976, that is when the death certificate was written. Hence, that's why she didn't put pneumonia, because she's a child, and life expectancy wasn't that long back then, because again, this is the 60s. So you got to put something down, pretty much. So in December, still in 1996, they dig up Michelle's body 3.5 decades later to see if there's like any like remains of abuse. Like, because I feel like even if you're dead, like, usually there's, like, signs that you were abused. So, to see if it matches George's story, pretty much. And apparently there were signs of abuse that were so bad that had Michelle lived, she would have to get plastic surgery just to even fix it. She had a broken nose, multiple fractures to the back of her head, healing fractures on 2 of her ribs, and apparently fractures on her left arm. They also discovered that she had been in the hospital more than 20 times in the short 4 years that she has still been alive. Of course, now we gotta track down Mary, because it's now pretty much been confirmed that you killed this child. So they tracked down Mary, and she is still married to Bill. Yes, Michelle's father, Bill. They're still married. They track her down, and she's living in West Columbia, Texas. And apparently, since Michelle's death, Bill and Mary apparently conceived 4 kids of their own, all of which survived, and 2 girls and 2 boys. So, of course, they go to Mary's address. She's probably not expecting them to be questioned like this later in life. She said, look, I wasn't aware of any abuse, and I don't remember any injury. So then detectives, I guess left at some point, and a reporter showed up at the house because he found out that this woman had been found out 35 years later, which, you know, obviously that's like a hella good story even back then. So he goes to the house. He's like, hey, they're trying to move. So in Montgomery County, Texas, Mary and Bill are pulled over, because by the time they get to the house, the couple's like already gone. Where the kids at, I don't even know. I guess the kid is 35 years later, so I'm assuming the kids are like grown now. Like, it didn't mention like the kids were in the car with them or anything. So, and we don't even have any of the kids' names. So, before you ask. They're claiming, yeah, what, while in Montgomery County in Texas, they get pulled over, and they're saying, we're going to go get a lawyer up in Illinois, because they came from Illinois to Texas, right? So then, of course, they're not believing this shit, which, as you shouldn't. And Mary gets arrested, finally. She pleads guilty to involuntary manslaughter, and her bail is $1 million. So I guess Mary just had money like that, or I guess Bill had money like that, I don't know. Despite her bail being like $1 million, I don't know if they made like some sort of payment plan or what was going on, but Mary apparently had the $1 million. She paid it, so she was out because she had paid the bail, but you on house arrest until like further notice, so you won't try to pull no shit, like try to leave the country or some shit. And so remember, the 4 kids that I said Bill and Mary had together, it said that before age 5, for all 4 of them, They've each been to the hospital, like, not each, but like collectively all together, they've been to the hospital at least 150 times before the age of 5. So, of course, Mary was only sentenced to 5 years and was set for release sometime in 2001. Of course, with that being 22 years ago, people are saying that she more than likely is dead. I have not found an obituary on her. There are people that are speculating this one particular woman as being Mary and that she died, I think, like 2009. But I feel like it would have said if she died 2009, since she got released 2001. But of course, this case isn't as well known. There's no other information. Again, told you what I could. Most information came from the first source. Faces Forgotten. Again, go check him out. And so with that being said, I will see you fables next week. Bye.
So if I play dead, will you regret everything that you did, that you said? I don't think you understand what you're doing, and my heart's black and blue from the bruising. I feel like when I'm with you I'm losing. I feel like you think that this amusing, sitting there gaslighting and confusing. Was it me? Is it me? Am I deluded? I'm the one who's always sorry, the conclusion. Even though